Welcome to GRE. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. GRE listeners are a different breed. You are financially expanding your means rather than merely living below your means. We talk to a listener like you today as she tells us how she and her husband started small and are expanding their real estate portfolio and how it's changed their mindset and their passion to grow their family and explore life today on Get Rich Education. If you're looking to grow your passive income from real estate, pay attention. My Property Stats is a deal analysis tool developed by an active investor to cut the time it takes to analyze any deal by over 90%. For any real estate class, you can calculate the exact price to pay to hit your cash flow and IRR goals. Build a world-class pro forma. Calculate the most you should pay for a renovation. Run multiple scenarios with a comparison tool and more. My Property Stats is the all-in-one toolkit for real estate investors. That means more deals, more cash flow, and more returns. Go to mypropertystats.com/GRE now and use the coupon code GRE to get 10% off your first year. That's just $90 a year for a tool that can save 10 hours per deal. No more spreadsheets, no more juggling multiple files. Use coupon code GRE to get 10% off at mypropertystats.com/GRE. Knowing the difference between a turnkey provider and a vertically integrated rental property company can cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars over the life of your investment. Some companies sell you a property they don't own, renovate it with contractors they don't control, refer you to a property management company they don't manage, all in multiple markets because they can't source enough inventory. That's why truly passive investors work with our friends at JWB Real Estate Capital, perhaps the country's only vertically integrated rental property investment company. They operate in one market, Jacksonville, Florida, and their whole job is to make investing in rental properties easy for you. In fact, because of their vertically integrated approach, their clients have gained 79% more home price appreciation than the overall Jacksonville market since 2013. Find out more about why it pays to invest with JWB. Call them at 904-677-6777 or go to jwbrealestate.com/GRE. GRE listeners can't stop talking about their service from Ridge Lending Group and MLS 42056. They've provided our tribe with more loans than anyone. They're truly a top lender for beginners and veterans. It's where I go to get my own loans for single-family rental property up to fourplexes. So start your pre-qualification and you can chat with President Chaley Ridge personally. They'll even deliver your custom plan for growing your real estate portfolio. Start at ridgelendinggroup.com.
You're listening to the show that has created more financial freedom than nearly any show in the world. This is Get Rich Education.
Welcome to GRE, from Long Island, New York to Longview, Washington, and across 188 nations worldwide. You're doing the right thing before you're doing things right with that vehicle that's made more ordinary people wealthy than anything else, real estate. And you're doing it without having to be a landlord or flipper. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. We've got a GRE listener like you on the show today. Now, she and her husband have chosen to do the landlording thing for quite a while because, as you'll see, they've been growing their own portfolio right in their own local market. A lot of U.S. metros aren't conducive to the high ratios of rent income to purchase price like Dallas-Fort Worth is, or has been, though that's really starting to change here in the last 5 years or so. Back in 2019, I was spending some time visiting real estate in Texas, namely both Dallas and Houston on that trip. And we did an informal GRE investor meetup in Dallas-Fort Worth. And one of the attendees is now today's guest on the show. And a little insider hint here, if you ever want to be on the show, it helps if we meet in person because I tend to remember you. I hope that you and I can meet someday. Yes, you and I. But in any case, I have a podcasting friend named Jacob Ayers. I had dinner with Jacob and his lovely wife earlier this year in Houston, by the way. Anyway, my friend Jacob told today's guest about the show years ago. Yeah, that's how she learned about GRE about 7 years ago now, so a long-time listener here. And hey, if you're looking for another real estate show to listen to, check out The Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom, hosted by Jacob Ayers. Another one, while I'm at it, is The Real Estate Guys with Robert Helms and Russell Gray. I like to throw a little love their way. They've always been such giving guys. Back to today's guest. She is one half of a young married couple that's been applying her knowledge, her potential then, into something kinetic by taking action. Let's meet today's listener guest. I'd like to welcome in a longtime GRE podcast listener, listening since 2015, Christian Montalvo. She's based in Dallas, Fort Worth. And get this, she is a wife. She is a mother of 2 children. And today she is 8 months pregnant as she sits here with me. And so she has all those associated doctor's appointments and everything else. And wait till you hear about what she and her husband are doing in real estate investing. And despite all this, she made time to be on the show today. And, you know, it was Benjamin Franklin, I think he was the one attributed to saying that if you want something done, ask a busy person, because the busier the people are, the better they manage their time. Christian, welcome to the show.
Hi, Keith. Thank you so much for having me. I am totally fangirling right now. So this is such an honor to be on here.
Now, when we have these listener guests, I haven't always met them in person. Of course, I met you in person when we did an informal meetup in Dallas, Fort Worth in 2019. So that helped you stand out when a number of listener guests wrote in, because I really want to talk more to you. Interestingly, it was the year 2015 when you started listening to the show. And that's when you had been working an employee job, a W-2 job, for about 18 months. And I know it was a night shift job. So tell us about where you were then and how you progressed from there as that employee.
I started my W-2 career after going to grad school, and I was basically a food microbiologist. So shocker, I had nothing to do with real estate, had nothing to do with investment real estate. But yeah, I was working third shift, traveling around, basically doing like audits and compliance for a company that cleans food processing plants. And so I would spend a lot of time in the car by myself and at night and trying to stay awake. And I would listen to podcasts. And a really good friend of mine named Jacob Ayers, who also has a podcast, and you know him. We were both kind of in the same story. He was working a lot in Houston. We had graduated around the same time. And he said, you got to check out this podcast. You're going to love it. We had already been kind of even though we'd only been working for 18 months, we're like, man, working W-2 where it can be a real grind. Like, is this really what we want to do for the next 30 years of our lives? And he was like, check out this podcast. It talks all about the things that, we've talked about. I listened to that first podcast of yours that talked about house hacking, and it just blew my mind. I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazing how somebody could get a house, low down payment, live in it, have someone else pay the mortgage, and then continue to just grow a portfolio that way. It really, really impressed me.
Yeah, there actually is an alternate way to one trading their time for dollars in a job that they're often not passionate about, somewhat soullessly then, and doing that in perpetuity. There is an alternative. So what was your living situation like then, Christian? Were you a renter, or had you owned any property yet by 2015? Or?
Yeah, I had just been a renter. My husband and I, we had just barely gotten married. And we were living in a tiny apartment in DFW, paying almost $1,000 a month. It was just insane. It was also one of my first times I had to really pay for rent. I always kind of figured out a way to live with family members and live really cheap, or do jobs in high school as an RA to cover my rent. So paying this almost $1,000 a month was just this is ridiculous. I can't believe, how do people live like this? How do you ever save money? And it was nothing. It was $1,000 a month. But at that moment, I heard the podcast and immediately started scheming. Got home from that business trip, told my husband, we are changing up our strategy. We are going to continue living here as long as we can, saving as much money as we can. And we're going to go find a small multifamily and a duplex and live in one side, and somebody's going to live in the other, and they're going to pay the whole mortgage. And he was like, huh? okay, that kind of sounds like what we did in college, And I was like, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And we're just going to do it over and over and over and over again until we don't have to work anymore. And he was like, what? This sounds like it's going to take a million years. And we are still both working our W-2 jobs, but we did continue to do it multiple times. It's really, really changed our lives. Just having those little stepping stones of building that income semi-passively with these investment properties.
Tell us about that first purchase and then building from there.
Yeah. So about 8 months from the time that we discussed, we were ready. We had our 3.5% down. We utilized an FHA loan.
Just how I started.
I knew exactly what I was looking for. I remember the duplex. I had an agent, but I found it myself because I knew exactly what I wanted to find. I was looking for that 1% rule, which is hard to do in DFW now, but back then you could do it. And yeah, we jumped in. It was a $200,000 3-bed, 2-bath duplex. We felt like we were living in a mansion compared to our 1-bed, 1-bath apartment. And it was crazy. We moved in. We were one of kind of some of our first friends to buy a house. The people that were buying like normal single family homes. Right. And they were like, what's your mortgage payment on this? And I'm like, oh, we're paying like barely $500 a month because the tenants on the other side are covering majority of the mortgage.
Yeah.
So that was a little bit nugget. It wasn't even that. It was a big financial change from $950 to $500 a month, but it just really inspired us mentally to keep going. And we knew that this was something we could do and continue replicating.
Some people still aren't aware that you can use an FHA loan, which is a 3.5% minimum down payment program on a single family home, duplex, triplex, or fourplex. Fourplex is the most number of doors you can get with an FHA loan. And in general, you need to live in one of the units yourself at least 12 months, that being your owner occupied period. And your minimum credit score, last time I checked, just needs to be 580. The higher the credit score you have, the lower the mortgage interest rate you're going to have, of course. This is a very organic way of starting out. With an FHA 3.5% down, owner-occupied duplex, you're using a lot of leverage there. That can be a good thing as long as you're able to control the mortgage. And then where did you and your husband grow from there?
Yeah. And the plan was we knew we had to live in it for a year. So we set the clock for a year, saved as much as possible for that year. At the 1-year mark, I called up a broker and said, hey, I want to look into refinancing my house and getting out of this FHA. And he was like, oh, congratulations. What's your plan after that? Because he saw that we were living in a duplex. I go, oh, well, I'm going to utilize FHA again to go find another one. I remember at the time, in that time period of that year, we had a baby and I wasn't even cleared to drive. And I walked with my baby in a stroller to the bank to go. It was more like I needed to get out, not like I was the sad mom, but I walked with him outside to the bank and I was like, I need to talk to someone about mortgages and my loan. And yeah, they got me set up. And at the 1-year mark, the property had went up enough that we were able to refinance into conventional. And then we pretty much started looking again. It took a few more months to find that next one, but the next one we actually utilized the FHA for a fourplex. And it was funny because we kind of went backwards in size. We went from a 3-bed, 2-bath, lots of space. Our cats had their own room to we moved into a 1-bedroom, 1-bath with our baby. That was a little tight, but that move really changed things. That was a big sacrifice for us because we went from paying $500 a month out of pocket to pay for a mortgage to once we had that other side rented out. And then in this fourplex where 3 out of the 4 units were rented out, we actually started cash flowing. Everything was paying for itself. And we were cash flowing over $1,000 a month after all expenses were paid. So that little change in a year, making the change mentally, even just shy of 2 years prior, really started to just do a big wave of change for us.
Now, if you're keeping score here at home, Christian and her husband had 1 property and then 1 child. Now we're up to 2 properties and 1 child. She keeps growing her family as she grows her real estate portfolio here, Christian. So is the reason that you refinanced the duplex from the FHA loan into a conventional loan, is that because you can only get 1 FHA loan at a time under most circumstances? So therefore, once that was done, you could go ahead and get a new FHA loan on the fourplex.
That was exactly it. We could only get 1 at a time. So we wanted to get out of that first one and it was worked out. We were in a market where things were just going up. It wasn't hard. I think even we had to pay a little bit out of pocket. And now the Dallas market, has exploded like a lot of places in the country. But I remember, I think we even had to pay a couple of bucks, like maybe $2,000 or $3,000 out of pocket to really hit that full conventional status. But it was well worth it, thinking about all the money we had saved over the years and what we were about to do again. So it wasn't a big deal for us to pull that money out and make sure we get out of that FHA so we could utilize it again.
So when you're in the duplex, you're living on one side, renting out the other. So therefore, you just have one rent income. However, when you move from the duplex into the fourplex, you went up to 5 rent incomes because now both sides of the duplex can be rented out and 3 units of the fourplex can be rented out. You're living in the 4th unit of the fourplex. So you had downsized your quality of life somewhat because you and your husband and your young one have smaller size, downsized living situations. So you keep growing, you keep expanding. Who was next up there? Was it one more property or one more baby?
So it's funny that you say that. We did do, because then we were making more money and my husband had job changes and things. Okay. So pretty quickly after we bought that fourplex, my mom had stumbled upon a duplex down the street from her school and that she was working at. And she called me. She said, I think there's a duplex that might be for sale. And at this point, when we first started doing it, my mom kind of thought we were crazy. She was like, I don't know what they're doing. And now she's at the point where she's finding deals for me. So I show up at this duplex and I knock on the door and sure enough, some guy is just fixing it up. And I'm like, hi, are you going to sell this? And he's like, well, I'm fixing it up to sell it. And I said, okay, how much do you want for it? He's like, well, it's not finished, but I was hoping to get $200,000 for this duplex. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. And I hadn't seen it. He's looking at me like, what? Like there's no tenants or anything. But I started to see the market start to change. Multifamilies were going up in price in just that short amount of time. So I knew like, this has got to be a deal. It took him an additional like 3-4 months to finish the property, but we got under contract. And that was our first deal that because we weren't living in it, we had to put, I think 20-25% down.
A real down payment.
A real down payment. Yeah. But we got it and we didn't have any tenants. And so I knew all about putting tenants in it, getting it occupied. It wasn't like all of the other properties up to that point had already had tenants in them. We inherited tenants. And so I put 2 tenants in it and started growing that one. And we had done 3 deals. And I think that was 2018 at that point. So we went from 1 door to 5 doors, not counting where we were living, and then to like 7 really, really fast in a short amount of time. But it was great. A lot of people were like, oh my gosh, you must have been so busy. I will say the busy part didn't necessarily consist of the tenants, and their requests and their needs. It was more our fourplex that we bought was a little bit of what some people may call like a dead horse property. It was a little tough to manage. Might have been a little over our head. It had some roof issues and some electrical. And so it wasn't really the tenants being needy. It was actual upkeep with the property. But we learned a lot of lessons from it. It was amazing to learn about that. And then at the 1-year mark, when we hit that one, we started looking again to do it all again. So, and we did it another time into a single family home that this time had a detached mother-in-law suite. Because my husband was like, hey, so this whole like fourplex thing has been fun, but our next move, can we please make it into something a little bit more comfortable? And around the time I found out I was pregnant with our second born. So there was baby number 2. It was time to grow the family. So I found a little 1,100 square foot single family home. It felt like another mansion compared to our 1 bed, 1 bath. Yes, sprawling 1,100 square feet with the converted garage. And it had a mother-in-law suite in the back. So I was like, it's a multifamily. So it meets my qualification and meets his because he wanted something with more space.
So you can kind of get the best of both, a primary residence with a mother-in-law, a detached unit on the same lot. In other places like California, that might be known as an ADU. So, Christy, you gave us a lot there. That's a good thing that you had someone tell you that you're crazy. It happened to be your mother in this case, because in a sense, that kind of shows you that you're on the right track and you're deviating from normalcy. And in life, I try to avoid normalcy. I mean, normalcy is really just a synonym of mediocrity, and I really would rather live an outsized life rather than a normal life. So that was actually a good sign that you're starting to be called crazy. As long as you're using your head and your gut backs it up, you're probably on a really good path there. Now, all these purchases that you're talking about, I'm pretty sure they were all in your local market, in the DFW metro.
Yes, they were. I kept thinking, we're going to run out of deals. We got to start looking way far out. Or my husband and I have always been open to even looking out of state. But yeah, I had alerts on my computer specifically for multifamilies. And I was kind of one of those people that tried to look at 3 deals a day, look for 3 deals a day and analyze. Sometimes there were times in DFW in the last couple of years where there weren't 3 deals a day or 3 deals, multifamilies a week that were really popping up. But it made it easy also to kind of track them. And so anything that popped up multifamily, I was seeing it. I had my eyes on it. And the cool thing was, because I was constantly looking, I mean, we were ready to pull the trigger. There was no sit and wait. Let's think about this for the night. I knew exactly what I was looking for. So when I went up to those properties, I would walk them. Sometimes one time I didn't even walk them. One time I was out of town for work and I called my husband and I said, would this be somewhere you would live? Because it looks like the numbers will work. I didn't see it until we had the keys. But yeah, I would make offers same day, with my realtor. I'd say, okay, yep, the numbers work for me here. I feel good about this area. Let's make the offer.
A lot of times it can be good to be in multiple markets, but if you're only going to be in one market, it's hard to think of one that's safer than the Dallas-Fort Worth metro. I really would say that. So let's talk about what we're up to now. It was up to the year 2019, and it's by that time you had about 5 properties and all long-term rentals, or?
Yeah, so it was 4 different properties and it added up to about 10 doors.
Okay.
It was kind of funny. We moved in and had our second baby and we're very busy in that mother-in-law suite home that we couldn't really even get the mother-in-law suite started. It felt like we were considering doing Airbnb or long-term rental. And finally, I kind of looked at it and realized that our fourplex was making us really crazy. It was taking a lot of our time and it was starting to, the cash flow wasn't growing as much on it. It needed a lot of upkeep when we were looking at the numbers. So we did end up unloading. One of my bigger regrets. I wish, we would have always held on to it. I love the idea of holding on to properties.
Yeah.
But we went ahead and unloaded it. It was the best for our family at the time. And it was crazy because when we finally unloaded that property, we were cash flowing maybe like 600 and looking at the fourplex individually. The rents weren't going up as high as we'd like. And the maintenance was getting harder and harder. So we unloaded it and we decided to focus our energy on the little mother-in-law suite. And I said, let's just unload it and let's see where this goes. And our mother-in-law suite of 1 door in our backyard started making cash flowing more than our entire fourplex almost. And it became a little bit more manageable. So in that time, I learned a big lesson on quality over quantity. Because up until that point, I was so obsessed with getting doors. We got to get more doors. We got to get more doors. And with 2 little ones, and it was still both working W-2s, it was getting a little bit hard. And it was crazy that there was a door in my backyard that was producing just as much and we couldn't seem to figure it out. So that was a good lesson. And it definitely changed our strategy as we looked at things moving forward. Again, at the beginning of our story, getting into that fourplex, everything, best lessons, learned so much about the process. But now as we're growing like our family, we started to say, okay, I got to stop this like shotgun approach where I'm just like jumping into whoever will accept my offer, And so that was a really good lesson learned for us. But yeah, we lived in that one. And then we hit COVID. We basically were buying a property a year at least. And then we hit COVID. We kind of slowed down like everybody else. And when we came out of COVID thinking, we're ready for some more space. And I was like, great, I'll go find us another 3-bed, 2-bath duplex. Like, it's going to be great. And my husband was like, hey, can we get like a normal home? There's some new builds down the street that I like. And, could we go look in that neighborhood? And so we finally made it to the point after 3 house hacks that when I looked at it all, I said, okay, as long as when we rent out everything, we don't have to pay that new mortgage. We're still living for free. We can go and look at getting a nice big home. And it was right at the tip of the craziness in DFW. It was right when it was starting to happen. And we went into a place and we thought we would be able to pick out what we wanted and look. And they're like, we have 5 homes available. And this one's the best deal.
So we're up to about 2020 now when we have the feeding frenzy and all this scarce inventory nationally, the 20% appreciation.
It was the beginning of 2021 and prices had jumped a little, but not to I think we bought our house at like 160 a square foot. And now things in the neighborhood are going for 220, 250 or same neighborhood. But I remember 160 a square foot, everybody was like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. I can't believe you did that. And I was like, we're not paying it. Our tenants are paying it. So it's going to work for us. They were like, we have 5 houses available. You can have, this one's the best deal. And I was like, again, kind of took it as, most people are like, don't you want to make sure it's how you feel your forever home? And I had such a not crazy emotional attachment to real estate at this point that I was like, oh no, we just went with the one with the best deal and got into it. And it ended up being a house that's like 3 times the size of our little 1,100 square foot house.
All right.
It was great. Definitely not anything we were looking for, anything that big. The best part was once we started having to pay that mortgage and we started renting our last house, just again, the rental income more than covered our primary mortgage. So we got to go from house hacking, these, duplexes, fourplexes, mother-in-law house, and to living in a really awesome, very normal neighborhood in a very short amount of time with eliminating one of the biggest expenses that families see, which is, your housing. And we don't have that burden thanks to our rentals.
It's interesting at how not just people in DFW, but people nationally need to recalibrate how they think about prices. I have a friend in Dallas, Fort Worth, and they told me 10 years ago, if you lived in a $300K home, you were like a baller in Dallas, Fort Worth. And now, even there in that market, that's probably less than the median priced home with how things have changed. Well, I've got more with Christian when we come back, including do she and her husband contribute to retirement plans, or are they all in on real estate and more? You're listening to Get Rich Education. I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. You can get a 50-year-old house somewhere or buy a new one directly from the builder with tenant-resilient amenities already built in. With over 3,000 Florida units at different construction stages, they are exclusively for investors. President Wagner Nolasco and team also invest strongly in their own product. That's belief. Start at build2rentdirect.com. That's build the number 2 rentdirect.com. or text 407-927-5074. Hey, my friend Damian Lupo informed me that checkbook IRAs have been made illegal by the U.S. tax court. If you have a checkbook IRA, your holdings are now disqualified with taxes and penalties up to 50%. But don't panic, Damian and the EQRP company can fix this. Those IRAs can be converted into EQRPs retroactive to last year, getting those tax deductions and reducing your taxable income. And this way you can invest your 401k or IRA in real estate, Bitcoin, gold, and even your own business. So whether you're a full-time investor or retired or even a dentist with dozens of employees, if you're listening, you qualify, the EQRP works. It's a solution. You'll control your money, kill UBIT, and pay way less taxes. To learn more about this strategy and free up your retirement money, get the newest EQRP special report. Text GRE to 307-213-3475. That's text GRE to 307-213-3475.
Hey everybody, this is Matt Bowles from Maverick Investor Group. You're listening to Get Rich Education with Keith Weinhold, and don't quit your daydream.
Welcome back to Get Rich Education. Every once in a while, we like to bring a GRE listener onto the show and hear about how the show has influenced them and their quality of life and the decisions that they make. Today's guest is Christian Montalvo. Christian, all right, so at this point, you sold the fourplex and you and your husband have 5 doors in addition to the property that you live in now. So I'm wondering, do you or your husband contribute to traditional retirement plans at all, or are you really completely invested in real estate when you think about, for example, your long-term investment dollars?
My husband, first of all, he is a financial analyst.
Interesting.
So he did finance in college. And so he likes the idea of taking advantage of like the 401k match. After listening to all the real estate stuff, I never contributed to the 401k match. A year ago, I did switch from my night job into a regular. One of my customers actually hired me on for a nice, flexible, normal hour job. So when I did switch to that job, I did end up doing the 401k match, but we definitely are not banking on it. It's not my favorite thing. My favorite thing is, what can we do? I still want to get more properties. I still want to be looking deals. And he's very much on board too. So we do contribute to that 401k match, but I just always tell them when we look at it, something that we can have just to have another little diversify the portfolio a little bit. But it amazes me the returns that we've seen in our real estate just in these 4, 5, 6 short years that when I'm like, if we were putting that money just into a regular account for investment account, there's no way we would see those kinds of returns. That's not even including the income that comes from the tenants. That's just looking at how much the properties have gone up in value. So we do contribute, but it is not like our end all be all favorite thing to do.
Yeah, and it's interesting that your husband is a financial analyst, so he would pretty well be able to determine that your total rate of return from real estate, we like to distinguish it here as real estate pays 5 ways. That total rate of return, if it's anything less than 20 to 25% annually, that's actually a disappointment. And you can compare that 20 to 25% to what you get in the traditional stock, mutual fund, and ETF world. But you bring up a good point. It's not just that rate of return. It's the fact that you're not deferring all this income until retirement like what one does in a traditional retirement plan. You're getting an income stream so that you can improve your quality of life and live that quality of life that you want in your 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, and not just waiting until that minimum age 59 and a half until you can start tapping a 401k. And that's just really hard to duplicate in a lot of other investments where it cash flows because you're living a good quality of life along the way. For example, you're traveling. I know you visited South Africa, for example.
Yeah, my husband and I, we try and get out of country once a year. We're traveling regularly. And another thing, you brought up a big point. One thing with children, we never know what could happen. Thankfully, we've been very blessed. Our boys are healthy, but I do have friends with children that have had health problems. And we wanted to make sure that we set ourselves up on a path that if ever one of us had to stay home, we could do that without having to be concerned about our quality of life. I do still work W-2 and it's very relaxing and I enjoy it. But my husband is now at a point where he switched up careers and he was part of the great resignation. And now he's kind of a part of the great regret that they're talking about. And we were laughing about it the other day. And the cool thing was when he's pulling his hair out with this job, it helps him knowing like if he wanted to walk away, he could. Like we're just fine. We could figure it out and he could walk away and we have the money coming in from the properties. If he wanted to take some time and figure out what his next step was, then we have that option and it's really nice. And that's one of our biggest motivators to continue acquiring more properties and not throwing money into a 401k or another investment account. Just continue to grow this real estate portfolio to always have that option.
Gradually reducing the have-tos in life and replacing them with the want-tos in life. I love that. So, is there anything else about your overall investment strategy that drives your decisions?
A year ago, I became a real estate agent because It was funny. I was thinking about taking on a sales job within the food safety side of my career. And I was talking to my realtor who we've used for all of our deals. And he just looked at me like, you're thinking about selling stuff that has to do with food microbiology. Why don't you just sell houses? And he was like, you find all your own deals. Like you could help people. And I spent so much time looking at things. I decided to make it official and become a real estate agent. And it's been awesome. As soon as I hung my sign, I didn't really hang a sign anywhere, but notified people, some friends on social media that I was a real estate agent. Really, it was for my own benefit, just to continuously have easy access to the MLS and be able to make offers without having to bother anyone. A lot of people came out of the woodwork and was like, can you help us? Oh, I have a friend who's looking to do a house hack. I have investors out of state that are looking. And so although I do help people find like their forever home or just a primary residence, I work with a lot of investor clients. And so that's been great for our strategy as well, because sometimes I see a property that's so good, it's hard for me to pass it up myself. But that's how my clients tend to trust me, because they will ask me, is this a property you would buy? And I'll be able to say, absolutely, yes. If my husband, we're not buying right now, but we would totally buy this property right now if we could. That's been a really good thing for our strategy too. Actually found our last door that way. It was a property that was a great deal. I was helping a client get it. And unfortunately, his financing fell through. And I developed a relationship with the agent on the other side. And I was like, hey, I know this deal might be falling through, but can my husband and I buy this property? She was like, yeah, sure, let's do it. That's another little step that we've done to help us just continue to keep an eye on the DFW market.
Yeah, you can really stay in the deal flow there more so than being involved in a job where you're cleaning food processing equipment. That's certainly important. But yeah, now you have something that complements the investor side of what you're doing there as well, Christian. Do you have any last things? I know before you came on here, you said there were some things that you learned from listening to the show that you'd like to apply to your strategy and mindset.
One of my favorite things that you talk about, Keith, is the scarcity mindset that people have. And definitely with seeing things change with inflation, the market's going up, I'm hearing a lot with friends and people saying, well, that's just so expensive. I just can't afford that. I can't do this. And sometimes, my husband and I wouldn't say we're frugal people. We like to shop when we like things, we go on trips, but we do spend our money on things that we like. We try not to spend them on things that don't matter to us. I always think about that scarcity mindset whenever I'm looking at the price of something. And I'm like, okay, it's not if I can, it's how can I afford this? What do I need to do? And usually it revolves around buying another property. Like, oh, if I buy this property, it will create cash flow that will fund this expense.
Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite. It's almost like a game for me. My husband, we were looking at getting him a new truck and we could have obviously just dropped down cash for it. And I was like, no. Like, we don't know what deal's going to fall in our lap. And I'm like, let's see if we can buy a property that will pay the payment. That's really how we would do things. I would joke for a while that we would buy a property, go on a vacation, or buy a property and fund another big purchase like a vehicle, or buy a property and have a baby. With babies come lots of expenses like daycare and things. And so it was nice having the income from those properties that every time we were making some sort of life change, whether it was a materialistic thing, a trip, or a child, it was like an income bump, like you would see with a raise at a W-2 job, but instead it was with a property and a cash flowing tenant. And the great thing is every year we're able to see that rental amount go up a little bit with each property. So it doesn't just stop when you first buy it.
Yeah, it's don't live below your means, grow your means. And it sounds like you're following that rather than saying, I can't afford it. And yeah, once you're aware of an expansionary mindset, it does start to sound pretty old from friends saying, I can't afford it. You're asking, how can I afford it? If you want to buy a new car with a $650 payment, first find a property with $650 of cash flow that goes ahead and funds that car payment, which might just look like a wash to some people, but typically the property is appreciating at the same time while the tenant pays it down, really growing your means there. An example of living below one's means is collecting $2 subway coupons. Well, I mean, that's okay, but like, how many of those coupons does it ever take to build wealth? There just is no number. That doesn't work that way. So instead, doing what Christian's doing, or learning about how to start out in house hack with an FHA loan, or learning how to become a real estate syndicator, or learning how to invest in out-of-market turnkeys. These are all examples of expanding your means, and you're really doing it well there with your husband, Christian. So it's been really cool listening to your story. Do you have any last things you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, if anybody's looking for an investment property in DFW, please feel free to hit me up. I would be happy to help you. Again, I work with lots of clients out of state, or if you're in the area, I'd be happy to meet with you and help you out, help you find whatever it is you're looking for.
Let our audience know how they could contact you if they just happen to be looking for those types of properties in DFW, since you are a licensee now.
My email is Christian, CHRISTIAN, at Fraser, FRASER, Realty, REALTY.com. I'd love to help you out with whatever it is you're looking for.
Christian, we are wishing you and your husband well with your soon-to-be newborn. Thanks so much for sharing your story today.
Thanks, Keith.
All right, in 5 years, how about we check back with Christian and see if she and her husband have more properties or more kids? I'm thinking properties. Now, sure, if you're doing real estate and you've been benefiting from how it pays 5 ways and the inflation triple crown and all those other wealth-building GRE principles, I mean, do you still invest in these conventional retirement plans? It's really difficult to do that when you know that it's largely akin to postponing your life, putting away your dollars and your energy and your time in your youth, just hoping to get them back in old age. Let's see. with real estate, you could get residual income now and in perpetuity, or instead with IRAs and 401ks, well, you could start that only later in life. Some have said that 401ks should not be called tax deferral plans, but a more apropos moniker is life deferral plans. But if you're getting a dollar per dollar match from your employer, I have long thought that it's worthwhile to only contribute up to that amount. But yeah, to participate in that. But as you might remember, it was a few years ago here on the show when tax expert CPA Tom Woolwright let us know that he's even a detractor from contributing to the match portion. Just don't contribute at all. That was his guidance. Now, listening to today's guest, Christian, well, first of all, I remember meeting her there at the GRE meetup, and she struck me as a pretty focused, goal-oriented go-getter. For example, notice today how she and her husband are often positioned. They've gotten ready ahead of time. They're ready to pounce on expanding their real estate portfolio when they already have their financing ready and in place. So if you get pre-approved, which is better than pre-qualified, if you get pre-approved with your mortgage lender first, then you can enjoy pouncing quickly and being able to move fast on your next property when that right one becomes available. It's definitely better than the alternative, which is getting excited about adding a property and then going to see quickly if you're pre-approved for a mortgage. Okay, that deal might be gone by the time that takes place. Christian knows the parameters of what fits in her buy box, and she kept her emotions detached while she and her husband were coming up through rental properties and living in one unit of them themselves. She and her growing family are living better and better, except when they took that step back to a fourplex, but they're living better now with that brand new single family home. And something intangible that they've gained here, I mean, how important was this when we learned that now, anytime one spouse could stay at home, they have the ability to do that, even though they're both still working at this young age, the peace of mind of knowing that they don't absolutely have to have requisitely both incomes. That is giant mentally. And yes, why would you, or the husband in this case, sink, say, $60,000 into a new truck when you could borrow for the truck at a lower interest rate and instead invest those funds in real estate at almost surely a higher interest rate? A scarce, old-fashioned mindset says all debt is bad or truck debt is bad because it's a depreciating asset. An abundant mind says, I've got low fixed interest rate truck debt because I'm using it as an instrument of arbitrage on good property. Here's what else an abundant mindset asks. Why would I tie up $60,000 in a new truck? Why would I have all that tied up there? Yes, NOIs and cap rates and cash flows, they are generally lower than they were a few years ago, but now, arguably, and depending on the market, rents are rising faster than property prices. Plus today, compared to a few years ago, the rate of inflation is almost surely higher than truck debt is. So you're winning there too. When you borrow, even for a depreciating asset like a truck, and inflation, the rate of inflation is higher than your interest rate, the dollars that you get to pay back the lender with depreciate on them faster than the lender's interest charges can accrue on you. Now, you might have to listen to that again, but if you understand that, you are really getting ahead. Now, notice that I often put these thoughts in the form of a question. Ask yourself a better question, a question like, why would you? Because there could be a reason still to pay all cash for a truck. Like, for example, your mortgage lender says that, well, wait a second, your debt to income ratio is too high with the truck payment, so you better pay that off to qualify for more real estate. Okay, see, that's at least a better answer and a financially savvy question that you're asking yourself rather than just saying, oh, well, it's debt, so it's bad. It's not about retiring debt. As long as you have the cash flow to service that debt, it's about building income streams while being prudently leveraged. That's how you get ahead. That's a great example of expanding your means rather than just living below them. And yeah, Christian has been finding her deals in Dallas-Fort Worth. She's been fortunate enough to live in an investor-advantaged market. Big thanks to Christian Montalvo today. If you're looking for nationwide income properties, including North Texas, that is what we do here. I can help you there. You can get started at gremarketplace.com. It's free, where you create just one login, one time, and get access to real available properties in investor-advantaged markets that are conducive to real estate pays 5 ways and our strategy here at GRE. And also, we are looking to launch GRE webinars. Yeah, you can be on a properties webinar live and hosted by me. It looks like our first one will be coming up in St. Louis, Missouri. And to stay up to date and get those webinar announcements, make sure that you are subscribed to our Don't Quit Your Daydream letter. And I write every word of that letter myself. It's sent about weekly, and you can sign up for that free at getricheducation.com/letter. If you want to know about our webinar launch, sign up free there at getricheducation.com/letter. Next week here on the show, we're going to talk about a unique real estate investment that so many GRE listeners have gotten involved with these last few years. And I love talking about this particular investment next week because it really scratches my itch for my love of geography and climate and all of that, and a good measure of diversification. And plus, it's more passive than turnkey real estate investing. You're going to get an update about it, and if there's room, how you can get involved too. It's something that's really going to set you apart. That's next week. Until then, I'm your host, Keith Weinhold. Though you might quit your day job, don't quit your daydream.
Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for individualized advice. Opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have the potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of Get Rich Education, LLC exclusively.
The preceding program was brought to you by your home for wealth building, GetRichEducation.com.